Okay, so many of the candidates that I'm working with have asked for a video on the infrastructure changes that will be implemented as of January of 2024 with the new implementation of the new CPA exam. Figured I'd go over them by dissecting each based off of the actual document released by the AICPA. And the document is called the 2024 infrastructure changes here that I have up to the CPA exam. As always, I'll put in my opinion, but I'll try to keep it as factual as possible. So we'll jump right in to going into the 4 infrastructure changes. One is assessing research related in clinical thinking. The second is by replacing the Excel spreadsheet with the JavaScript-based spreadsheet. And the third is removing the written communication task. Fourth is eliminating the multi-stage adaptive testing and the multiple choice question testlets. There's actually a fifth. They don't label it as such. Consolidating the CPA exam sample tests. I have it kind of as a fifth, but in reality, they have labeled it 1 through 4. So, I'll go over with the document the way we usually go over these items is that, essentially, CPA exam, it strives to remain current, with revisions due to, the standards, the auditing standards, the tax laws, the regulations, in accordance with the policies established. So that's basically what they're striving for here. And then it goes into, again, the last big infrastructure change, which I thought was interesting, was in 2018, they upgraded the testing centers to leverage this high-definition displays installed in the Prometric test centers. So that's a pretty big statement that over the last so many years, they felt to stress the fact that they've upgraded the monitors, which I think is comical considering that you're looking ahead. There's still words. I'm not sure what high definition is going to do to black and white text, but that was an infrastructure change. Going into the significant ones, like I said, is going to be it's going to be concurrently launched, which I thought was important. When they say concurrently launched, with the 2024, and they give a reason for that. The reason why it's concurrent is that they didn't want to lead to making these changes before January because they want to do it after, because they expect to have a little bit of a delay in January. So I guess if you're taking your exam in January, there's an expectation that there's going to be a delayed grading window that's going to occur, which is unfortunate because obviously January is when many CPAs or accountants rather are launching into the busy season. So I should say, people that are trying to get their CPA are launching into the busy season if you're working at a big firm. And so what's going to end up happening is that you're not going to know if you passed or failed for longer due to the implementation of the 2024 exam structure. So what they kind of did is they said, what we're going to do is we're going to do it during the implementation of the 24, take the benefit of the delays that will already happen. So this way you're not incurring delays now. And I thought that was very, a good idea if you're going to do it anytime. January, a lot less people are testing. January is heavy testing. February, March is obviously the busiest time of the year for accountants, and so it tends to be a lot less testing. So I think if they were going to do it anywhere, that's a good place for them to do it. So that's a good idea, in terms of that. But let's go into each one specifically. So the first change is assessing, and I really kind of focus on this word assessing because a lot of people kind of like the research question. As I'm talking to different candidates, everybody's kind of feeling that was the easiest part. What they're moving away from, which I thought is that they're not getting rid of it, but what they're getting away, they're moving to an assessing research-based simulation. So what that means is that they're going to be not only asking you to find it, but then they're going to leverage that into an actual, sim, which was not the case, right? Currently, what you do is you take, you find the research, and then finding it is the question. Now, not only finding it, but they also want you to apply it. And I think that's a big shift, right? Is that, and it says it right here, a research task-based simulation will be introduced that will provide an assessment of the research and the critical thinking skills. So it's not only the finding, right? So as of now, right, the current, and I like the way they kind of break out this memo here, the current research question focuses solely on the search, okay? Now they're moving from not only going from the search, but now they're going, and that was solely, right? If you look at the word right before, it was solely on the search. Now they're going to be, I believe it sounds like they're going to be narrowing down what you have to search, so making it easier to find. But the caveat is going to be you're going to have this additional step, and it looks like there's going to be multiple type of questions that are going to come out of this. So you're going to have an easy find, or an easier find, I should say. And when I say easier, the reason why I'm saying easier is because they're actually, one of their kind of caveats here is, and I'll read it, that they're reducing, it sounds like, right, the removal of, they don't really go into details on how they're going to do it, but what they're looking at is eliminating the current research question format and permit the removal of, certain of these items. So I don't know if they're going to give you excerpts or what the game plan here is that, but it looks like this having the ability for the software to have all these different types of authoritative literature was actually providing some functionality complaints, and that's using their own, regarding the ability to manipulate the material on their end. So I think what they're looking to do is, and it kind of makes sense, right? With the with Google being a huge part of kind of giving any good researcher a place to start, right? I mean, a lot of people start with Google and then kind of work their way backwards, and then you go into the authoritative literature. So obviously on the CPA exam, that's not something that's an option. So what they're doing is they realize that let's narrow down the functionality of the search portion, or not base it solely on the search. And what they want to do is they want to actually bring in some problem solving and analysis. And I think that's kind of the way the exam is, been moving towards that, is eliminating just the recall and the remembering, and moving towards more application. So that's always the motto that it's been since 2004, really, is to try to bring that forward. So, assuming that finding it will be easier, the application portion will probably be more difficult. I mean, I'm not going to lie here. I mean, I think anytime they add an application function to anything, there's always this difficulty. I think especially when they're first implemented, because a lot of people are not used to it. So, I mean, I'm assuming they're going to probably look for research type questions that have some kind of not obscure rules, but we'll call them unique rules, and then how you can apply them. Which, I mean, to be fair, is the whole point of being a CPA, right? Is that you're going to have to do that on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and so I think it's definitely a good skill to add, and so I think the exam is moving in the right direction. The solely search functionality before was is outdated. Okay, so that was number one. So now let's go to number two, right? So number two, they're replacing the Excel spreadsheet with the JavaScript based spreadsheet, and this really is a unique. I mean, anybody that's taken a part of the exam to this point knows that, I mean, it was considered Excel, but it was very, very hard to use, or difficult Excel, because a lot of the functionality was removed. So there was a lot of complaints from people that you can't practice because the Excel that you're using on your computer is not exactly the same Excel you're going to be using on exam day. And that's one of the reasons that they kind of cite here, and we're going to go over it in detail because I think this is an important one, is and just to get to the punchline, they are going to give you the ability to use this new JavaScript-based spreadsheet model. So I think you're going to be able to see it before the exam. But with that being said, right, I think they do a good point of saying that it is acknowledged that Excel is ubiquitously used by firms and their clients, right, which basically means that everybody's using Excel, and that they cite a couple of issues from the reason why they're moving away, right? Because when you make a statement that all the firms and everybody's using it, then why are you not using it? And so they're saying that it's not working properly. I mean, that's their biggest gripe here. They do not even recognize, right? So a lot of candidates are saying that they don't even recognize the spreadsheet is in Excel because the functionality, right? The locks that are, there's a lot of the functionality that you would use in Excel are not available. So what they're kind of getting at is that if you can't use the real thing, and so you're using an Excel that doesn't look like an Excel, and the Excel has all these other issues with it, why not just move to a JavaScript-based program, and they call it SpreadJS. So when you see that on some of the stuff that's being released, just know that it's just the new version. But I mean, it's not a new version, but I'm saying it's a different version of the Excel, which was not Excel in it to begin with, so I'm not really sure the difference, but we will see that. And they are going to release that functionality. We'll get down to it a little bit lower, but I think towards the end of the third quarter of 2023. So we will probably do a video on that, on the performance of that as it comes closer. So all right, so, and I like the way they said it, additionally, continued use of Excel will not be technologically possible when the CPA exam test delivery provider and the AICPA move to a cloud-based infrastructure. So I think this is purely just easier for them. And I'm not sure if it really is a positive or a negative, but it is a change nonetheless, right? And so now they go over the positives that they believe that SpreadJS has many features and functionality similar to Excel, but it's not Excel, right? And they believe that the SpreadJS should provide an overall improved candidate experience by reducing exam restart rates. And so that's I heard that mentioned a few times, that the restarts are really their biggest, they believe it's coming from the Excel. I'm not sure if how that is or why that is, but this supposedly is going to change that. So this should be, this is their real reason right here, is that it's going to help with the restart rates. And I think that's a better explanation, other than saying the two paragraphs before are kind of getting into the reason why they're switching. But when you boil it all down, you kind of get into this part right here. Sample tests, users, right? And so this is where they're getting into, where they don't expect you to kind of come out of left field on this. They're going to give you beginning the third quarter of 2023, right? You can practice with this in advance of taking the exam. So I think it's a positive overall, right? I mean, like I said, let's just see how usable it is, and that will determine if it's better or worse. But from a starting point, they're definitely kind of moving in the right direction in terms of the functionality aspect. Okay, all right. So, and I would, curious to see in the comments if anybody wants to see, as that gets closer, or when it's released, right? I'm sure everybody's going to go mess around with it, but maybe a more formalized approach to what actually has changed. They actually give a link here that you can take a look for yourself. But like I said, let's take a peek when that comes out. So removing the written communication task, right? I hear a lot of people through the video that are celebrating, right? A lot of people hated this, but it's funny, through the candidates and through the years, what you see is everybody hated it, but they kind of come right out and say, and we'll get to this part, that they've never really, they only measured the ability to write, and they were, it says over here, it says it is focused solely on the measurement of the writing ability, and not, the current written communication does not assess the content accuracy. So a lot of people, and there was a lot of rumors started of, do they actually read what I write? And so the answer is yes, they read what you wrote. However, there is a sense of that wasn't what the measurement function was. And so we'll go over the bullet points on why they're removing it, right? There's 4 that they give. So the writing communication, right, just uses real estate. I like the way they use that term for the assessment of increasingly relevant and important knowledge and skills. So I think what they're really getting at is they want to remove this kind of arbitrary writing assignment and put something in that loops in the content. And I kind of agree with that, right? I mean, it wasn't arbitrary. I mean, I understand the purpose. The purpose was to make sure that people came out with the ability to write clearly and concisely, which is a skill that is necessary, right? And especially if you're in Big Four, there's no doubt about it that you're going to have to write a memo if you haven't written a memo. Even as a staff 1, I mean, not that many, but I'm saying you get asked as a staff 1 to write a draft to help out your senior, if you will, or your supervisor. But my point is that writing clearly and concisely, I think, is something that's kind of left to the colleges and universities that are, giving you the ability to take the exam in the first place. And I think that's kind of, and I give some other bullet points, but it says the writing communication does not provide an assessment on the accuracy, right? We talked about that. It's solely a measure of the writing ability, which is a con, right? That's the reason why they're removing it. Eliminating the writing removes the delay. And I think that's also important, right, is that not entirely sure the grading on this, but I would imagine that there was a good amount of effort related to grading the writing portion, and not only grading it, but making sure that it was, it passed muster. And it's funny because if you had any doubts as to was it being done by an actual person or not, it says the assessment value of writing is extremely limited and does not support, right? So the assessment value and the ongoing cost development, right, of the writing item. So, I think it's good and that they're kind of moving in this direction. I also believe that the last paragraph kind of goes into that it was expected, all right, that the automated scoring of essay responses would soon be able to assess both effective and accurate writing. Research into this automated scoring of essay has not advanced as expected. So I think from moving where it was a paper exam, then the electronic exam, and then I believe that they believed that at a certain point that this was going to be fully automated, and they're realizing that it wasn't that easy to make this assessment. And so I'm assuming at some point there was a live person kind of going through the grading on this, and so it was difficult, and it is difficult, right? I mean, that's got to be a big component in releasing the scores on time, is to read through however many hundreds and thousands or whatever the number is to get to that point. So I think this is going to help the score release states and make that more fluid, even though we don't know what that's going to look like. But it's going to move forward in the right direction if you're eliminating the essay portion of it, which essentially is got to have a human touch to it. So that's okay. So the fourth item, which is probably the most important, but probably the most overlooked, okay, is the removal of the multi-stage adaptive testing on the multiple choice question testlets. And so, being when I took the exam, it was coming out of the writing portion of the exam. And so this was a big deal then, which is, and for those of you that don't know, they kind of give you like a little synopsis here, okay, is that the current structure, right, was that the multiple choice question includes two-stage adaptive design, which basically means that you would first receive a medium difficulty multiple choice question, and then based on how you do on that, whether you get it right or wrong, right, you were kind of routed into either another medium or a difficult, right? And so if you can kind of think about this logistically, there's got to be an algorithm there, right, that kind of points you, and so each person's test was different, and so that's a lot of power to be able to kind of come up with this infrastructure to be able to use that. And I think what they're kind of getting at is that at the time when they implemented it, right, that was a big focus And who knows if they thought that it was going to be easier to implement this or keep it going as much as they did. But what they're saying is that, now multiple choice questions are reduced, right? There's a less of a focus on it. And so the exam is moving towards this kind of application. And so since there's a greater emphasis on higher order skills, right? When they mean by higher order skills and task-based simulations, they really mean that you're not memorizing anymore. It's not as easy as A, B, C, or D. The simulations really kind of drive the ship here, and so when you kind of get into is this multiple choice is less important, if you will, and so because it's or less of a focus, right? And we're going to do a video that analyzes both exams, the pre or the current exam versus the 2024 infrastructure changes. And what we've kind of saw was that there is this they're reducing some multiple choice questions, putting more simulations, and that's kind of the theme, right? And it's been moving that way since 2004. And so when you have that kind of conceptual difference on what they are trying to implement, you're going to have this issue where maybe it's not as important to have this robust system. And once again, if they're really focusing on simplifying the assembly, right, which basically means behind the scenes with these crashes and whatnot. I'm assuming that this is going to be a big plus, not having to run that algorithm behind the scenes that's kind of deducing what exam question to give you based on what you get right or wrong. Excuse me, not the actual question, but the difficulty levels testlet, right? So we're talking about the whole 30 question testlet, not just one individual question, but still there's a lot of power behind that, right? And so I think that reducing that and make it more, and I think to use their own terms, linear, okay, is definitely a good direction, and it's going to make their, they say it over here, this linear design will provide, right, sufficient reliability, accuracy, and validity, and provides efficiencies and reduced costs, right? So I think this is more of a internal help to them, but there was a white paper that was released I want to say when I was about 15 years ago. I haven't been able to locate it since, but it kind of went into the mechanics on does this testlet difference or difficulty help or hurt actual test takers. And so if I remember correctly, it really hurt the average test taker more. So maybe this is a step in moving the exam in a more, I'll use their terminology, linear, but maybe also a bit easier because you're not dealing with competing with different testlets compared to different people, and so that makes the curve a little wonky, if you will, if you're not able to compare apples to apples. And so this is definitely going to have an effect. How that effect, harder or easier is yet to be seen. But at the same time, right? Because when you have a difficulty testlet, if you're a high achieving candidate who is kind of on the higher echelon, right? You kind of deal with this kind of theory of, well, okay, I can handle harder questions, so I'm going to do harder questions. Does that level the playing field or not? Nobody really knows, at least from the outside. On the inside, I'm sure they have an answer to that. But, it's yet to be seen if this is going to hurt or help. The last page is the last is kind of that they're consolidating the sample tests, right? So the sample tests where you used to have one for each one, they're consolidating them into. And so I'll leave you. This one is not really that tremendously important in terms of the exam. You're going to see it on the website when they change it. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but that's kind of the infrastructure changes. So if you have any questions, make sure to put them in the comments, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay.